Hello, and welcome to Digifabricators, the show where we learn how makers and artists use their computer driven tools for fun, art, and profit. I'm your host, Jeff Stein, aka A Weird Guy, and with me is my talented but humble co host, Al Schultz of New York Woodworks. How you doing, Al?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Good to see you today.
It's good to be here.
All right, let's fire the official podcast disclaimer off so we can get started. Even though we pretend to be experts on the internet, I would like to point out that neither of us have any actual training and are just guys winging it in our shops and learning as we go. All advice provided is based on our personal experience and possibly inaccurate assumptions and is worth exactly what you pay for it. If listening to this show causes you to take out a loan to buy new and expensive digital tools, you may tell your spouse that it was our fault, but do so at your own risk. So, today's guest is a famous artist who's been featured in newspapers, podcasts, and even has his artwork featured in a museum. His miniature artwork is a sign of times gone by, despite using the cutting edge of technology to create it. Welcome to the show, Chris Raley from Route 9 Signs.
Good morning, gentlemen. It's great to be here with you. Thank you for asking me to be part of your show.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for being here.
And I've seen some of your prior guests already, and I'm just here to say I'm not worthy, but thank you.
Oh,
Well, there's a lot of people that would disagree with that.
Well,
yeah, me. I'm kind of fanboying out here today.
well, no, it's great to be here. I'm an admirer of both of your works. Jeff, I'm a little more familiar with you for over the years, but yeah, you both are extremely talented, and I'm honored to be here with you.
Well, why don't you give us a quick who you are, what kind of stuff you do, and what kind of tools you own to make that happen.
Okay. My name is Chris Raley. I'm an artist, a maker, a miniaturist primarily. I specialize in recreations of kind of iconic signs, not necessarily neon signs, but anything that, any business or hotel or whatever that has a kind of a unique sign might be something that someone wants a miniature version of in their home. And so I specialize in that. There are a lot of miniature artists who are kind of generalists. They'll make buildings and signs and just like a little bit of everything. I tend to kind of focus down just on primarily on signage. And there are a few people that are doing it now, but when I started doing it about 6 years ago, there wasn't really anybody else focusing on signs like I do. And I don't like a crowded workspace, so I was pretty happy with that. I thought about getting into woodworking. I wanted to do fine woodworking, but there's, first off, the Facebook groups, the Facebook like box making groups, that place, you ask a question and instead of getting an answer, you get yelled at. So I gave up on that pretty quick and just kind of decided to find something that I could do on my own. As far as the digital fabrication stuff, I started out making jewelry, autism awareness jewelry. I would make because of my son has autism, and so I learned how to use a laser cutter back then, probably 2013, 2014. I had a K40, the notorious Amazon $400 gonna burn everything down laser. I had two of those actually, and I learned a lot. There's so much you can do with a little machine that has like no safety features at all. So I learned how to use a laser with that, and currently I'm using I have a Glowforge Glowforge Plus. It's my second one of those. Been using Glowforge for about 4 years. I have a Bambu X1 carbon with a couple of AMS units, so I can do up to 8 colors of printing. I have a Bambu A1 Mini that I also use. I have a vinyl cutter, basic woodworking tools. So that's kind of where I'm at, like what I do and the primary tools that I use.
So, what are you using the most? I mean, you're making small replica signs, which
Right.
are, desktops, say what, 12, 18 inches tall, 24?
Generally, I try to keep them about 18 inches. I don't like making them too small. One, because when you want to charge somebody X amount and it's a little tiny thing versus, oh, it's 50% bigger, you can kind of play with that a little bit. But I like making something that's um, generally about 18 inches is kind of like where I peak out. And the reason for that is when I first started using my Glowforge, the bed size is like 19 and a half, like the width of it. So I was making pieces out of wood, like stacked layers of wood when I first started. So the Glowforge would only go about 18, 19 inches. So that was kind of like my limit. I've made signs that are 4 feet tall. I've made the Stardust sign I made earlier this year was about 3 feet tall. But I've learned how to, kind of, if I make something big, I can piece it together. But generally, I try to keep things within the constraints of my machines. Like the bed on the Bambu, the carbon, the print bed is basically 10 inches by 10 inches. And so I try to, my biggest component for any sign, I try to keep it within that limitation if it's something I'm printing. So yeah, about 18 inches, give or take.
Isn't it amazing how the constraints of our specific tools limit how we make our art based on what fits?
Yeah. But it really it has taught me how to be a little more, creative. Like that Stardust sign that I made in that I donated to the museum in Las Vegas. The top part of it is about 16 inches wide. So I had to print just the top of that Stardust sign is actually 4 different prints that I pieced together just to make like front and back, left, right. So it's like 4, and I use like the almost the full size of the bed. So I've learned it's nice to be able to do everything as one piece, but it's also nice to know how to expand to go beyond the limitations of your machines if you have to. I know you
So you're
talked about
building
how.
an. I'm
What's
sorry.
that? Go ahead. Go ahead.
So you're building in layers. You're building like a carcass and then adding details to make
Y-
him
yes.
as it grows. Yeah, yeah.
Right, right. And like, sometimes I will make a piece that's just I'll 3D print something that's just kind of like the support, like the main, like the bones of it. And then I'll go in with the laser and do the detail stuff, or I will then use a finer setting on the 3D printer and do the detail work. I don't generally don't it's not usually like a one piece print. I never
Mhm.
really do that. It's like that. If you saw the sign I made a couple months ago, it was from Japan. It was a sign from Osaka. Um, had a rusty channel. It had a bunch of light bulbs along the bottom. That was probably I would say about 300 different individual printed pieces, all in a 18 by 10 inch
Mm.
piece. Just
Mm-mm-mm.
tons of individual printed pieces.
So do you, when you start this process, you're wherever it is you do that or whatever, and you see a sign that you're like, oh, I want to make this sign. Where do you go from there? Or do you just acquire every photograph you can find from Google Images? Are there scale programs you're running to say, I want to make this 20 inches tall? Or do you just make it aesthetically pleasing and it fits and feels good? What's the
Yeah, I
process?
um generally the sign selection, most of what I make is commissioned. So generally the client is the one who's picking the topic or the subject matter. And at a bare minimum I need one photo. I can't I'm not a graphic designer. I can't create something all on my own. It would look like crap because I've tried. But I scour
Doesn't work.
there are a few databases and I love Google like Street View, Google Images, and there's some archives that I go through and I try and find as many photos of the sign as possible, and not just straight on of photos of like the face. I try and find a shot like if it's a motel sign, I try and find an angle from the street so I can see not just what the sign looks like on the front and back, but what the sides look like, how thick the sign is.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
when you turn it and you look at it face on, there is some depth to these signs, and being able to see it from the other direction really informs how it looks when you look at it face on. So I try and find as many different angles as I can. Some places you can find some of the artwork online. If it's a big chain like a Holiday Inn, you can find the artwork. If it's a Disneyland thing, you can find the artwork. But some of them I just have to just kind of draw it all from scratch, and it's literally just, you got your little curves and your points, and you draw a line and you just shape it, and you do it until it looks like what you're wanting it to look like. But to get the proportions right, if it's a sign that I can find like on Street View, I will go. One of the things that I I learned early on is perspective. Like if you're 10 feet away from a big sign and you're looking up at it, the perspective is way different than if you're 200 feet down the street looking at it.
Right.
The view from 200 feet away gives you a better look at actually like the proportions of the sign.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
will oftentimes go on Street View and get as far back as I can on Street View. It doesn't need to be a clear image. It doesn't need to be the entire sign, but it gives me a better look at what the relationship is between all the elements. It's not skewed by perspective, because if
Right.
you're standing at the
Right.
base of the sign, the top is 30 feet away, but the bottom is only 5 feet away. So you're gonna get some.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Mm-hmm.
gonna work. So I try and get as far away from it so that I can tell. Oh, these are the relations to the pieces, and then really my modeling is it's going back to when I was doing my jewelry making. I bought a Silhouette Cameo machine probably about 10, 12 years ago.
Which is
And
what?
it's a vinyl cutter. It's like a
Okay.
craft
Final. Yep.
level,
Cricket.
Yep. Yep.
like a Cricut, like a
Yep.
Cricut,
Yep.
but the
Yep.
Silhouette Cameo. And I started doing design work. For when I would use it, I would use their design software. And when I started using a laser, I needed SVG files. Well, I found out that Silhouette Studio, the software for my vinyl cutter, if you upgrade to the business edition for $100, you can export SVG files. And so I, to this day, still model everything that I make. I use the vinyl cutter software. I use Silhouette Studio, and it's all essentially, it's not a black and white image. It's an SVG. But to somebody who doesn't know what SVG is, I just say I draw it all in black and white images, and then you know transfer it into something like Tinkercad, because I don't know how to use what is it? What's the one that I paid $300 to Bob from I Like to Make Stuff, Fusion. I bought the
Fusion.
Fusion. I bought the Fusion class, and I still don't know how to use Fusion. But so it limits me. I have to do a lot of stuff manually in that program, but I know how to do it. Whereas if I open up
Yeah.
a Fusion or a Shaper or any of these programs, it's like I don't even know where to start. So
It's
I, I'm,
it's it's very interesting you say that. I'm finding now that we have had a few guests on the. I don't want to say old, but the more experienced we are as makers, the more experienced makers, like the ones with gray hair, like us.
mhm. Yeah.
I mean, Jeff's a unicorn, but I also do all my design work in. I have Vectric Aspire, which is
Hmm.
my first CNC software. So
Right.
it's what I learned. It's what I know. I've
Right.
tried. I've tried Fusion. I've tried. I just it doesn't make sense. And people
Yeah.
who see me design in Aspire are like, "Why are you doing that? That is the
Yeah.
most archaic thing." And I'm like,
Right.
"Well, it makes sense to me."
Right. Well, what I like about it is I'm finally at a point with my software that I use and the machines that I have, is that if I draw something and it's what I like is I can draw it out on my screen, and say I have a 50 by 50 millimeter, just a black square. If I print it on paper, it prints it exactly 50 millimeters. If I throw it in my laser, it will cut exactly perfect. Or if I 3D print something, everything, there's no, I don't have to change anything. Like if I do a lot of where I'll print something with like a channel, and I'll insert a piece of acrylic, and it needs to fit perfectly. And my machines and my software and everything, it all just works really well together. So It's not broken. It's not perfect, but it's not broken. And everything that you've seen me make has been made using those inappropriate software, those programs. And every once in a while, I'll have to drop down into Inkscape to export. Like if I'm going to send something off to send cut send, if I'm going to have some metal cut for a piece, it needs a DXF file, and so I'll make my SVG and my little primitive vinyl cutter software, export that to Inkscape, turn it into whatever the file it is that send cut send needs, and then send it off to them. So I do have other programs, but it's real. I couldn't do anything else in Inkscape. That's about the only thing I know how to do. It's just this other program. It's like second nature. The Silhouette Studio is, I use that more than anything. I know it really well.
This is a really good. I'm glad you said this in this line is happening, because it's a very good to point out to people that you don't have to have the biggest best computer, the biggest best software, the biggest best machine, the
Right.
biggest best whatever.
Right.
Insert your biggest best thing here. You can do this with what you have.
Yeah.
You can just figure it out. I subcontract to a sign locally, a good friend of mine, and his software packages are $30,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, wow, that's amazing, that's great. I don't understand it, and that would be such a waste of money for me.
Right.
But
Right.
he sends me files to cut from his $25,000 software, and I import them into my $2,500 software, and they
Right.
cut exactly the same.
Right, exactly. And if I were doing things, if I was doing like the carving like that Jeff is doing with the CNC, I would need something different. But really, man, if you see something that came from me that is not a flat plane in one direction or another, that's something that I've had to go into like the Tinkercad. Like if I have something like a ball or a sphere or a bowling pin or something like that, then I have to kind of lean on other stuff, or I have to try and find existing models and modify them. But generally speaking, that's the good thing about most of these signs that I recreate. They were made in sign shops that have a lot of flat. They were made from flat stock to begin with, and most of what I work with is flat stock. And if it's not flat stock, it's something that I'm 3D printing that's like a box or a rectangle or a cube, or it's something that that has like a flat side that I can extrude into whatever shape I need. And so it's yeah, I'm lucky. If I were, and that's part of the limitations though, because I've had people say, "Oh, can you make this for me?" And it will have like a statue. It will have like a pig, like an actual pig, and like for a barbecue place. It's a sign shop molded this pig in fiberglass, and unless I can find a 3D model online that's close to that, I just have to tell them no, because I can't model a 3D pig like that. I can't. If it's two-dimensional and the paint job's not too complex, yes, I can do it. But so that's where I'm limited, is I can't do. There's certain things that I just can't model, and certain things that I like, certain paint jobs I can't recreate, and that's fine. I've stayed busy for 5 years not doing those kinds of things, so I'm lucky.
Wow.
Right. Now, I did jot down another question here quick. I'm sorry, Jeff, please go ahead.
No, that's okay.
No.
I was just gonna say that all artists have their high spots and their low spots, and modeling weird three-dimensional organic shapes it's its own level of art in itself. I mean, you basically have to sit down and master Blender or something like that to
Right.
get. And that's one that's beyond me too. I do lots of straight edge modeling or extrude from SVG kind of
Right.
modeling.
Yeah, that's what I do.
But yeah, the organic stuff that's rough. That's
And
a whole different skill set. So
And one of the things that I deal with, and I don't know if I've ever touched on this. I've kind of mentioned it in when I've done other, the podcasts that we've all listened to over the years. But I have vision issues. I'm not blind in my left eye, but I can't pardon my language, can't see shit out of my left eye. Like dead on. My peripheral is fine, but like if you were to hold your fist out, like arm's length, and hold your fist out about an area about the size of your fist in front, out, arm extended, I have a spot about that big that's just completely scrambled. It's like a kaleidoscope. It's moving like this. So when I look directly at something with my left eye, it's just kind of chaos. My retina is damaged from I had a lot of issues about 10 years ago. And in my right eye, I
with, with with a
my good
K40 laser.
yeah, no kidding. Yes. Had some near misses. Had some near misses. It's
Sorry.
right. It was right around that time. No, it's because I was very nearsighted as a kid. My eyes are all jacked up. But my right eye, I also have some retina damage, and I don't see straight lines. Everything has a little bit of a curve to it. Like when I go to pick out lumber at Home Depot, I can't just hold it up and look at it. I have to like lay it down on the floor and get down. Like, okay, I don't see any daylight on this one. Okay, this 2x4 is straight. I and so being a miniaturist who has no depth perception and can't see straight lines limits what I can do. I have friends. I have a friend who makes things out of paper. Milan Eat Zombie is her name on Instagram. She makes these just super elaborate little things out of paper. Like she made a scissor lift that you can like actually lift up, and like you could put two people in and go up like to the ceiling of a gymnasium and change lights. A lift like that, made it out of paper, and it's when it's down in its low position, it's only maybe an inch tall, if that, and it stands up several inches, but it's all paper and glue, and she cuts it, and I can't do that. I can't do that level of detail, so I lean heavily, and that's what kind of makes me different from other miniaturists. Is they have, for the most part, they have good vision and fine motor skills and depth perception that I don't have. So I really have to lean heavily on what I do. And I've seen comments. I did a video with tested a couple of years ago with Norm Chan, and one of the miniaturists was commenting on YouTube about, oh, this was a great interview, but as soon as he mentioned digital design, he lost me. And it was like, pardon my language again, but fuck you, dude. I can't um I can't work like you work. My eyes are shit. I need to use the laser or the 3D printer. Otherwise I can't. Otherwise I don't make things. That's so.
Right.
So I'm one of those people that really, it's almost an absolute necessity for me, because I can't do the real fine stuff anymore because my eyes are so bad. So, Al, you were pointing at something.
Oh, my furnace just kicked on. Is that?
Oh,
Can you
okay.
hear? I
Okay.
don't want to. I don't
No.
want to.
No, I can't hear it.
Sorry about that.
But so I at first I was kind of self-conscious about that. It's like, oh, well, I'm doing a lot of digital stuff, and all these other incredible artists, they're doing stuff by hand with their X-Acto knives, their rulers, and their straight edges, and paper and glue. But it doesn't mean that I have to do that. It doesn't mean I have to work that way. My way is doing it digitally. I feel like I found a way to kind of extend my career as an artist by using these tools. And to be honest, I'm making stuff that looks better now than I ever have.
And you know what? They're not going to be able to do that forever either, and you'll be miles ahead of them technologically when they have to start leaning on that technology.
Right. And the
No
thing is,
disrespect to anybody, but
well, I was, and his comment was like, "Oh, I'm sure he's a nice guy," and I'm like, "Well, why are you being a dick in the comments? Everybody else here is being cool."
yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, I went every once in a while. I go back to see if he had responded. I wound up
yeah.
blocking. He followed me on it. He's someone who followed me on Instagram, but he went on YouTube and was talking shit because I do digital stuff. And anyway,
Sadly,
just,
that's generally somebody who's not comfortable in his own place.
well, and I sent him a message. I said, well, one of these days when you get approached by Norm from Tested to do a video, you can do it your way.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like I am very lucky to have been in that position to do that interview.
Yeah.
and I presented myself exactly how I work. So when you get that call, do it your
Yeah,
way, and I'll be
yeah.
there talking shit in your comments.
It feels a whole lot like a Facebook group,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you mentioned that earlier, and
Yeah.
it's like I've left so many groups because it's like, listen, I don't need to be told what I have is garbage. I'm asking how to make what I have work,
Right. And
and
I just
you don't need to.
I've kind of not really, I guess, on a mission, but kind of a mission to prove to people that you can, because there's kind of this stigma of, oh, well, you just 3D printed that,
Mm,
period, and it's just dismissed, like there's no value or no quality to it, or
yeah.
no worth to it, because, well, it's 3D
Yeah.
printed. Well,
If you have a CNC, you're not a woodworker.
right, right, and it's just I'm trying to, especially now with these machines. Jeff, you can speak to the Bambu machines, how good those things are. It has really opened the door for me, to do some things that I really couldn't. And it's like, well, if I wanted to be a purist, then I wouldn't be making any of this stuff. If I want to be a purist, I would just be I would not be making things, because I can't. So if I'm not a purist, then I'm going to lean on the technology, and I'm going to make some pretty cool shit.
If you were a purist, you'd be putting signs on the Bellagio, the
Right,
real
right,
one.
yeah, right, yeah, yeah, exactly. And don't even get me started on people saying, like, telling me, oh, like, you should light your things, you should light. No, that's not. I'm not. If I wanted to light my signs, I would. I'm not interested in turning this into some electrical engineering project. I'm looking at making a sign you can sit on your shelf that's real pretty. I don't want the urge to be to turn off the lights and let the $3 worth of LEDs take all the glory, when I spent 4 weeks trying to make the rest of this sign look pretty. So I'm pretty happy with what I make, and I'm pretty quick to shut people down if they try to tell me I need to do something different.
Yeah, you're very good at what you do, and I even have
Thanks.
even more respect for you now, learning your limitations and what you're doing within
Yeah.
those limitations. That's amazing. Good
Yeah,
for you.
thank you. I if
Uh,
my retina specialist told me that if what I had happened, if it had happened in like the '60s, I would just be blind now. Like the
really,
technology,
yeah,
yeah, the technology is real. But yeah, public service announcement here. If you start seeing flashes in your vision, or if you start seeing, I've always had floaters, but if you start seeing thousands of little teeny tiny black spots floating around in your vision, get to the eye doctor, get to an ophthalmologist ASAP, because those little black things you see, that's parts of your eye floating around, blood cells and pieces of retina, and all the stuff. So anyway, just a public service announcement: take care of your eyes,
yeah,
and
yeah.
don't hesitate, because I got real close to losing vision in my left eye, like within a day or two, because it was getting really bad, and they had to do some emergency surgery to fix it.
Oh
So,
wow, that's tight.
oh, I've had the fluid in my eye drained, each eye drained twice. Like, they can go in and like suck it out, and then your eye just like refills all on its own. That's a whole different topic. I don't want to gross people out, but
Sounds like fun.
Yeah.
I I have actually thought about my future, though, in a longer sense of the future, as far as where am I going to be in my shop in, I mean, I'm what, in my early to mid 50s here, but
and
say 25 years from now, maybe 30 years from now, what am I going to be able to do? Am I still, I'm going to be a feeble old man. I don't know that I can trust myself with a table saw. A kickback could put me in a hospital.
right, right.
I mean, it would a normal person, but I mean, even more so. I mean, even a mild problem would be, but if I can still see and still use a mouse, I can still design things on a computer, and then I can make the machines create the stuff for me. So
Well,
the
I
the the fact that I can the fact that we can use a CNC or a laser or a 3D printer to do all of the hand work means that as you became less able to do things by hand, you can have the machines do that stuff for you. So that would mean that you don't have to just cancel. I mean, in the old days, it's like my grandfather basically just had to like stop doing stuff in his shop once he
Yeah.
hit a certain age.
Yeah.
But if he would have had the ability to do the artwork side of it with the mouse and then have the digital fabrication do the actual handwork part for
Right.
you,
Yeah.
then that'll extend your ability to make your art and your projects, another, 10 or 20 years. I think when I'm old and feeble, I can still 3D print and CNC stuff. I just gotta,
Well, I'm living that reality now. Different
exactly.
limitations, but for those who know me and those who may not, or I might be new to, I have a teenage son with severe autism and epilepsy, and I'm his primary caregiver. My wife is a teacher, and she works really hard, and my actual job is his caretaker. He qualifies for government support. Like he qualifies to have some in-home, what they call in-home supportive services, and I'm his provider. So that's my actual paid job, which I hope doesn't go away in the new year. Um, but because of cuts to programs, but I don't have the ability to sit in a workshop or in a workroom and sit and labor over things. I have the ability to sit at my kitchen table with my computer and labor over a design piece, but I have to be there with my son. I have to be in proximity to him. So I what I, you talked about, Jeff, you talked about when you're old, you can still work at the computer and then send it off to the machine and still create the things. You were talking about that. I'm kind of doing that now because I will get up at 3 or 4 in the morning when my son gets up and sit and do 2 or 3 hours of design work. I can stop, I can get up, I can take care of him, I can sit back down and go back to work. I can get it all the way I want it, and I can send it to my Bambu, the X1 carbon. I don't care if it's a 24-hour print job. That machine is so reliable. I know that if I get it all set up right and I get the bed all prepped and everything, I can hit start and I can come back tomorrow and the piece that I need is there and it's done and it's almost perfect enough to go on as is. So I'm already kind of living your reality, what you were talking about in the future, like not being able to work in the shop. I'm already kind of there, and so that's another reason why I lean so heavily on the digital stuff, and I've leaned more into the 3D printing because it's something I can do all the complicated work, and then my mind is free to do whatever else I need to do for my
Mm-hmm.
son or my wife, while my 3D printer is putting my idea into a physical shape, whether that takes an hour or 20 hours or whatever. Um, and so that is another way that digital fabrication, to tie it all together, another way that digital fabrication has kind of it, I wouldn't be an artist without it because I don't have the time or the ability. As it is, I tie up like half our kitchen table when I work, even when I'm assembling things. And I have even learned to the point, gotten to the point where I rarely even use like a wet glue, like CA glue or epoxy, wood glue. Sometimes I use wood glue for the bases, but I have gotten my process down so that not only can I sit and design at my kitchen table so I can see my son, I can also assemble at my kitchen table for the most part, because I don't use I'm not using a lot of hand painting. I'm not using a lot of glue. Again, with no depth perception, I'm just a nightmare with crazy glue. Like I can get it to within about an eighth of an inch of where I need it to be, and that's not close enough for most of the work
Mm-hmm.
that I do. So I've been able to. Uh, I'm already kind of working with that reality where I can't. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
safe doing these things, so I You know, I do most of my sign work is done on the computer, and then
Mhm.
you know, that's kind of where I'm at right now. So there is a future in it, Jeff. You can do it one of these days when you're 85 and you're wanting to make the latest and greatest 7-dimensional CNC carved thing. You'll be able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
You're gonna
have
somehow
a robot
you're
arm.
you're gonna somehow add time to your pieces somehow. I don't know.
Mhm. And that's just it. That's it's time. Like I'm a disabled vet, so
Same here.
I'm also living that lifestyle. You
Yeah.
know, like, oh, I can't do that anymore,
Yeah.
so I have to rely on like if I had to use a hand plane, I
Yeah.
can't do it. I can't
Right.
twist. You know,
Yeah.
I own a landscape company that we're phasing out because I can't run a weed eater.
Right.
I can't twist with a weed eater. You
Right.
know,
Right.
So I rely on my CNC. It's big. It's a
Right. Oh
four by
yeah.
eight.
Yeah.
So once I get a piece on there, then I can do. That's a lot of material to work with, you know, and
Right.
it doesn't have to move.
Right.
I don't have to lift it. I don't have to, you know,
Right.
and I don't have the retinal issues, but I do have, you know, back. I can't bend and twist and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So
Oh yeah.
we've had to actually if you look, my CNC is up on cinder blocks
Yeah. I see that.
because
Yeah. Just to make it easier for you to work.
just bending over to change a bit was
Right.
killing me. You know.
Right. You know, the people have this. The people have this. There's this stigma around certain assistive, well, like assistive technology. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's like, okay, so like my son, he can walk, he can walk, he can get on his 2 feet, and he can get all around the house. But like when we take him to Disneyland, I use a wheelchair for him because
Mm-hmm.
he will
Mm-hmm.
not be able to navigate through a crowd. Okay, so that's an assistive technology. I see,
Yeah.
I see, you know, people give us the side eye, and they're like, "Oh, well, he can walk. Why is he in a wheelchair?" And it's like, "Well, one, mind your own goddamn business. We're on Pirates of the Caribbean. You should be getting in the boat right now, you know." But
Right. Right.
but but it's assistive technology. So it's like, okay, well, he can, if he if we go to Disneyland and he's not walking on 2 feet, is he not enjoying? Should he not be able to go to Disneyland?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Should you not be able to work on your CNC, or should you not be able to do anything
Because I'm limited. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you're limited? You know, should
Yeah.
I be
Yeah.
walking around with everything blurry
Yeah.
because I, you know, glasses are some sort of an assist? Am I actually seeing things because
Yeah.
I'm using glasses to see them? You know, so
Yeah. Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
you know, it's people who have the luxury of not needing that type of an assist that I think are the ones who complain about it the most. It's like, put yourself in the shoes of somebody who can't do these things. You know, would you completely give up making what you make if you know, something happened, or if you found, you know, the drummer for Def Leppard, he lost his arm. And he's Rick Allen. You know, he's been playing drums longer with one arm than he did with two, but
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
leaning
Yeah.
heavily, he leaned heavily into assistive technology. Should he not be
Yeah.
drumming anymore, you know?
Yeah. That's a good. You know what? I'm going to start just that. I'm glad you said that because what I'm going to start doing now, or what I want to, when these people rise up against or to me, I'm going to just smile at them and say, "What aren't you doing because you can't see past your disability, whatever
Right.
it is that's holding you back,
Right.
whether it be just lack of knowledge or whether it be a physical ailment or whatever."
Right.
But you talk about the wheelchair stuff. I've had twice now. I try not to use it because I feel like there are people who need it more than I do. But I do have a handicap parking, and if it's
Use it.
a
I have one too. Don't
yeah,
be
yeah, yeah,
use it.
I agree. I agree.
Fucking
And I
use it.
use it when I'm in bad shape and I need to use it and stuff like that. But
Mhm.
twice now in the last year or so, I've had, let's just assume her name was Karen. Like walk
Fitting.
past me and go, "Yeah, you don't look disabled."
Yep.
And I've literally said, "What does disabled look like?"
Right. Right. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
I
and
The
and
best answer to that is, from a distance, you didn't look stupid.
Right. Right.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. But we talk, and this is kind of it's almost a conversation on repeat. And it's not that I don't want to have it, but it's like we always defend our use of 3D printers and CNC machines and vinyl cutters and assisted digital fabrication equipment.
Yeah.
And that's why Jeff, I'm so happy he asked me to join in on this little endeavor here to promote it and make it commonplace or common conversation. But if you really think about it, all these people bitching about these machines, there's an awful lot of these machines out here. If they're so bad and so terrible, why does everybody freaking own them?
Right.
Everybody's got a print. Well, I don't have a printer, but
they're not smart enough to use them, so they don't think anybody else should have the option.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say is what I try to do is I try to not be, and I'm not ashamed of how I work, but I try to be very open about how I work. I don't print something and try to pass it off as, oh, I made this by hand. You know what I mean? I will show close-up pictures where, like, if you look, you'd be like, oh, you can see some print lines in this piece. If you get right up close, I have kind of a rule where, like, if it looks good at arm's length, looks great to me. I try not to overthink things. There are some miniaturists where you can get like right up on a piece and you see more and more detail. I can't do that, but I don't try to pass off what I do as not 3D printed or not laser cut, and instead what I try to do is actually show people, look, this is actually, there is a lot of 3D printing in this. It might not look like it because it's a really good, well thought out 3D print made on a good machine. But I try to not hide that. I try to show people that you can do really, really neat work, especially nowadays with the technology and the machines that are available. You can do really incredible work with a 3D printer. And so I try to show people, yeah, like that last piece that I made, that it was kind of pink and there was a lot of metal, a lot of shiny metal. In my stories, I went and broke down what each piece was to show people this is laser cut acrylic. This is a 3D print with styrene on it. I try to, rather than kind of be ashamed, as some people probably think I should be, that this is how I work. I try to shine a spotlight on it and show people, no, this is how I work. This is, if you want something that's 100% handmade, down with a knife and all of that, hire somebody else. But if you want a really awesome looking finished piece, a sign that looks like the sign that you want, then I'm your guy, and I'm going to make it the way I make it. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be made that other way. It can be if you want it that way. Find somebody. But if you like what I do, this is how I do it. And like I said, I've kept myself busy for years now.
I think it has a lot to do with the detail, and it has a lot to do with how you're printing things. I mean, if you took an SVG, you extruded a couple spots, and you sent it over to your printer and you slapped it up on the wall, then I'd be, well, maybe that was sort of low effort and not impressive work because, you just told the printer to do some stuff. But once you've scaled things to the point, I mean, you've scaled your details in, and you've designed the sign as 300 individual parts that layer and nest and fit, and you can just snap the pieces together with tolerance because you've got it so tight that you don't even need glue.
Correct.
With 300 different individual pieces that are snapping in, that is not, I extruded an SVG and pushed the easy button and it just popped out over here.
Right.
So I can kind of see where some people get annoyed by what they perceive to be an easy button, where it's just like, well, they didn't do any work. They just downloaded the thing and then they just put print. And so, to be fair, if you, I mean, you can get a Bambu, you can go into the Maker World website, you can
Mm-hmm.
download a Flexi Dragon that's 36 inches long, and
Yeah,
you can load a roll of filament and push print, and it has literally no skill or effort. You just download it and you push print. Is that 36-inch Dragon super impressive? Well, it was impressive to the guy that modeled it, but I'm not impressed by the fact that you managed to download it and print it.
correct.
But see, there's lines of where there's art there. There was art there. The art wasn't you downloading it and printing it,
The art was the original guy
but
person who designed it.
right,
Mhm.
the original person who did the
You,
modeling
you,
was
you
the
know what?
artist in that case.
I have a thought, and it parallels. I'm going to try and get it out before I lose it. Um, I am not a graphic designer. I am not I'm not an artist who I'm not good at creating original things. I'm good at taking something that someone else made and translating it into something that I can make. And so kind of in that scenario, you talked about the person who created the dragon, that was the artist. And the person who just kind of downloaded it and printed it out is not the artist. The in my the way I see things, the artist is the person who designed that the sign that I'm making. The artist is the person who created person or persons who created the original artwork. I'm just a translator. I am just in this
Mhm.
scenario. I'm the 3D printer. Like in
Mhm.
your scenario,
Mhm.
I'm kind of the person who is. I'm kind of downloading all of their design and everything. Yes, I am translating it into what I'm
Mhm.
doing, but
Mhm.
I'm not creating it from scratch, and that's why I have a
Mhm.
little bit of trouble with the phrase artist, because really I'm more of a replicator.
You're,
You know what I mean?
you're
It's there is
you're
an
paying
art. There's
homage to them.
yes, there I'm copying someone else's artwork. There is art.
Mhm.
If you want to expand the definition of art, there is an art to what I do, but the
Mhm.
artwork that I create most of the time was created by someone else. And I'll give you a prime example of my limitations. The sign that I just made, this Coral Court sign, it was a sign. It was on Route 66 in St. Louis. Every picture I can find shows the face of the sign. It shows the reader panel. It shows the column. It shows everything, and I can work with that. I can take a blurry picture and get it, get my design sharp and looking good. But there's a work platform on that sign for the person who changes out the letters for the read, like the
Mhm. Mhm.
air conditioning, color TV, private garages, those big letters.
Mhm.
There's a work platform in all of these photos, these maybe 20 photos of the sign that I could find. I'm only seeing it in I'm seeing the edge of that. I'm seeing it kind of like I'm not seeing underneath it, I'm not seeing above it. All I'm seeing is just a metal, looks like a metal rectangle.
Mhm.
And if I make my sign where it's just a metal rectangle, that's going to look like shit. It's going to be like, oh well, he's got all this detail, but then this work platform is just a printed rectangle. It's like the monolith on the 2001 Space Odyssey on the moon. It's just a big rectangle. And so
Why do you
what
put a
I
sidewalk on it?
right so what I had to do was is I had to imagine, like, okay, well, what could this be? I know it's a platform. Okay, well, a platform probably has like a metal grate on it, for
Mhm.
traction. It probably passes through, so like rain and snow doesn't collect on it. Like you can probably see through it. And that was like one of the last things that I made on that piece, because it took me so long to figure out, well, what do I want this to look like? Because I had to come up with it on my own. It wasn't
Mhm.
something, it wasn't the letters on the sign, it wasn't the big shapes that someone else had already decided. It was something that I'm having to create kind of from scratch, from my own mind. And so I did, and it looks really good. I settled on a design that has some cross beams, and it has a grate, and the
Mhm.
same thing in my photos. You don't really see it but if you look at it from above, you can see down, you can see it. But
Mhm.
I have trouble with those types of things. I'm not great at coming up with my own designs. I've had people ask me to design things for them. I'm like, man, I haven't taken a single graphic design course ever. And another thing on that sign is there's a couple of little columns, a little like brick. They're like white stone columns with a couple of chains between them. Those also took me the longest to figure out how to do because it's not something that I could 3D print. It's not something I could laser cut. It's something where I'm going to have to actually sit with clay and materials and sit and kind of sculpt it out a little bit. So, I do have my limitations. I am not There are a lot of things that I am not really great at, and those are the things. It's funny, those little stone columns, if you see that sign, those two little stone columns took me longer to figure out than the rest of the entire sign, because I with the entire sign I knew what I needed to do. I knew I can 3D print this shape, I can cover it in styrene, I can laser cut the acrylic face, I can do all this. It was the kind of creating it from nothing, is the non-digital fabrication that gave me trouble. And that's just
Yeah,
that's just
I want to disagree with you on whether what you're doing as miniaturization counts as art. I want to
that's
disagree
where I
with
was
that.
going.
I want to disagree with that completely here because by by your logic, a guy who is a fantastic painter, say a Rembrandt kind of guy, pick somebody
I already see your point
pick
coming. Go ahead.
somebody that
Yes.
does landscapes, okay?
Right.
Now, say that you're gonna sit down and you're gonna paint a painting of a landscape. Now, in his eyes, he's not the artist because in his eyes, the earth is the art and the mountainscapes and the trees was just such an artistic shot that he just captured what he saw and translated it onto the paper, and he didn't actually create the art. He just took what he saw and he translated it and he put it into a different form so that other people could see it later. But he didn't create that image. He didn't create the image. He saw the image. It was there. There was the
Yeah.
trees and there was the sky. But
Yeah.
he saw it and he was able to translate that into the paint. And
Yeah.
you look at the pictures of the original sign and you figure out how you can recreate that at a what 1/20th scale or whatever the random
Right.
hell size it is,
Right.
but whatever was 100 feet down to 18 inches,
Right.
and you manage to scale that down and use 7 different types of materials with 4 different kinds of tools, and
Yeah.
it all cohesively comes back together and looks exactly like the big one, and somehow you feel that wasn't art.
I think the finished piece is art. I don't know.
Yeah.
I struggle with the term artist. I'm a little more open to it, but I need to be able to accept myself as an artist and not see it as taking away from the people who did the original stuff. That's what it is. I don't want to I don't want to look like I'm trying to be like, oh, the people who made the original Stardust pylon sign from the ad art in I think it's in Stockton or Sacramento, and they ship the pieces to Vegas. I want to make it clear that I'm not trying to equate myself with those people. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's
you're applying humility to your life, and that's an honorable thing. And the interesting thing about being an artist is you don't get to decide whether you're an artist. The consumer of your material gets to decide whether you're the artist or not.
right. Right. Yeah, that
You
that
know,
is a good point. That is a good point. Yes, you
like
both make really good points.
we see it, we see your work or anyone else's work. I see Jeff's work, and I'm like, wow, that's something I can't attain right now, or maybe ever. So to me, that's an incredible skill, and it's artistic, or it's creative, or it's ultra maker. It's all
Right.
terminology.
Right.
But you're a very humble and amazing person. So that makes your work even more impressive.
Well,
Because if you came out of the gate going, I'm a perfect sign recreator, and
yeah.
now we're having a conversation about what you are or aren't.
Right. 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 You're not an artist, but you are an asshole. Yeah. That sort of
There's
thing.
a lot of those.
Interestingly,
Right.
I've had people tell me that.
Yeah. Oh, and that's yeah, you're right. I try not to. I don't know. When Al, we messaged yesterday and you said you were excited to have me on, and I said I'm just a dude. I'm just a, you know what I mean?
I know.
I
Yeah,
don't
well,
see,
we're just
I don't,
dudes.
we're all,
Yeah,
we're all just people trying to, just trying to
yeah.
do what we do,
Make it.
and
Yeah.
if we need some tools to do what we do, awesome. Like that. Okay, my response whenever somebody, rarely now, because I think I've shot down most of the assholes over the years, and the people have seen me do it, and maybe they're not wanting to get me riled up anymore. But I tell people, like the Stardust sign that I made this summer that I took to Las Vegas and I put it on the original spot of the
Hmm.
Stardust sign. That's like the pinnacle, as a peak of what I do. And
Yeah.
you know, I I not that it has happened, but I would challenge somebody, make that sign, make it the way I did it, to the level of detail that I made it,
Hmm. Hmm.
without the tools that I used. It doesn't
Yeah.
exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are literally thousands of like point 0.8 millimeter bulbs that are accurate to what was on the real sign, but they're like I said, they're point 0.6 or point 0.8 millimeters printed out. There's no way, I don't think. I mean, there's always exceptions, but I don't know that somebody could actually sit and make it look as good as it does. And I'm gonna brag about that. Fucking sign looks awesome.
Sure. And
Um,
you should.
but without, thank you, and without using tools like I did, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So there's that side of it. It's like, if people want to talk trash about digital fabrication, it's like, well, think of all the things that wouldn't exist without it. So
Yeah.
um, there are signs that I've made that people there, and there are other people who are making signs who aren't 3D printing. They're bending wire. They're doing um, really good work. There's now several people who actually make miniature signs. And I view that as a good thing. I don't view it as like a competitive thing. I want to learn from them, and I have learned from these people. But it's you do what you can with what you've got. If you can make stuff, and you don't need the digital fabrication, fantastic. But there are some of us who one, do need it, and two, who are doing really amazing things that couldn't be done without it. So
What's a in the when we were getting ready to start, you were talking about your workflow. What does your workflow look like? You talked about, you're a full time caregiver for your son,
right,
and like you're able to work on your kitchen table and stuff like that. But
right.
like, do you have a Monday I do this, Tuesday I do this, Wednesday
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all.
controlled chaos is your
Well,
workflow?
it is whenever I can. I work when I can. When I have a, it's not entirely unique. I know a lot of people who have kids like mine, but um, I have to be able to just drop everything that I'm doing at a moment's notice
Of course.
and tend to my son. But also my work is the same way, where it's like, oh, I've got 20 minutes. Let me sit down here and knock this out. It's taking me longer these days to make my signs, just because I'm kind of trying to find more of a work life balance, and my son's been a little needier lately. But I'm losing my thoughts here. um my
Workflow.
workflow, yeah, my
Sorry.
workflow. So I really, there is no workflow. It's just, it's like,
Mhm.
it's a bunch of disjointed little sessions sitting on the computer and little pieces here and there, and I'll print a piece and I'll throw it in a box, and eventually I'm like, oh, I have enough stuff where I can start standing this up and start turning it into a structure. It's funny because I share with the clients, I share progress pictures, like test pieces, and this is what I'm doing, this is how I'm going to approach this. And it's funny because it'll be 2 months of me sending them pictures of all these separate items and all these things, and then over the course of one weekend they go from just a bunch of pieces in a box to like, oh, now we have a standing sign, and in 2 or 3 days I'm going to be completely done. So it's like, it's real slow go at the beginning, but once I solve all of my little mysteries, I don't, Jeff, you probably do this, like small scale tests, like when you were doing your test with your logo with the printing, you probably did you start right there, like your finished piece, or did you do some test pieces first, like to test your theory out, that way you have your layers set up and your threads and all that. Did you test that small scale, or did you go right to the finished piece?
Um, well, I mean, I did some prototypes with the threads to make sure that
Right,
I knew how the threads worked. But
right.
once I made sure that the threads were working, I just went straight ahead and printed my logo.
And that's how I work, is I will do small scale tests. So a lot of my workflow is, I'd say half of my time making a sign is just tinkering, just experimenting. Like, how can I make this right up to the edge of possible? Like a lot of times my workflow, I start out trying to do too much, like trying to make something too complicated, or make a channel letter that's too thin. And so most of my early time is just kind of experiments, just trying to figure out. I look at a sign and I figure out, sorry, I'm drying out here. I will look at a piece and I will figure out what is the most complicated piece that I need to make on this sign. Is it a certain type of neon or a certain shape or letter? And I will solve that problem. And once I get that solved, it's okay, what's the next hardest thing that I need to accomplish? And I will, so my workflow generally, I will start out with just kind of not even trying to make a finished piece, just testing a theory. Like, can I do this certain curve? Can I get this to look good? Can I get these pieces to fit together? So my workflow is a lot of problem solving, a lot of experimentation, and then bam, at the end, all of a sudden I have a sign standing. So it's
You're a
there is there.
professional
Uh,
elephant eater.
yes, exactly. Yes, one bite at a time.
One bite at a time.
Yeah, and lots of barbecue sauce. Um,
Does that does that tie in with your OK Go theory?
it does, and yes, and for those unfamiliar, OK Go rock band. I always tell people they're the guys who did the video where they're dancing on the treadmills, like in 2007. If you ever saw the video, it went viral. One of the first like viral music videos. But they have, and I don't use this for everything, but when I have like a complicated piece I'm going to work on, you there's a spectrum. There's picture a spectrum from left to right. On the left is impossible, and on the right is possible. Okay, so and all points in between go from somewhere along that point. You move from impossible to possible, and as your skills improve, that line shifts. The area that is impossible gets smaller. Okay, so what they do a lot of times with their music videos is they will start out with whatever it is that they're doing. They will start out on the impossible side. They will make things and they won't work. I will 3D print things that fail. They're too thin. It's just not working. But what I will do is I will tweak it a little bit and I will move it on that spectrum. Okay, well, that was too difficult. Let me move it over to the right. Let me move it more in the direction of possible on this spectrum. And you get to a point where you cross over from impossible to possible. At some point on that spectrum, you jump that line. And now the thing that you're working on, it is possible to do it. And if you live right on the edge of that line, if you move from impossible, you jump over just into the range of possible, that's where really good stuff happens. Like Jeff, a lot of the stuff that you do, Jeff, that I see is right there on that line. It's like, how in the world is he doing that? Well, he has worked it so much that he has crossed that line on that spectrum from the impossible side to the possible, and he stayed right there. And that's why the stuff that you do is so neat, and so you don't see a lot of people doing it because you have pushed yourself, you know what I mean? It's so, that is kind of like my okay go theory, is I will try to I will do a lot of things that don't work. It's like, okay, well, if I make this 0.2 millimeters thicker, will it work? And I'll print it and it won't work. Well, maybe if I make it 0.4 millimeters wider, suddenly I have a viable piece. And it's like, okay, well, awesome, it's going to look good because it is so close to failing, but it's not.
Mm.
It's so it, you know. So I try to
And
do that.
you're kind of guaranteeing the best possible outcome with the tool and ability,
Right.
Right.
as opposed to starting at the easiest end and going, well, that worked, it's good enough.
Correct. And that's
Exactly.
and that's and that's where,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
you
I
know,
like that.
I've talked to Jeff a lot. Yeah, I talked to Jeff in the past about that, about how he's not content with just being able to cut things out, you know, two-dimensional things. You're like, okay, well, now what's next? What, let me move further on this spectrum towards the impossible, and might even cross over into where, okay, well, this isn't working, so let me tweak it back a percentage at a time until now, boom, we crossed over into possible, and that's where the good shit is.
You got to
Mhm,
sit on the
mhm.
line.
Yeah, yeah.
The line
Man,
is where the fun is.
gentlemen, that's some life lesson shit right there.
Well, you can thank OK Go for that one, because I saw it on a
Yeah,
YouTube and
yeah.
on an interview. They have a video, if people want to know kind of an example of what I'm talking about. There's a song that's called "This Too Shall Pass," and there's a music
Uh-huh.
video. They took a studio building, a two-story building in LA, and turned the entire building into a giant Rube Goldberg machine. It's just a
Oh wow.
chain reaction, and it's all one take, and it's all set to the song. They tweaked it so much so, like, things are happening in this video along with the beats in the music, and that's
I think I've
because
seen this.
you
Yeah, yeah,
probably
yeah, yeah.
have. And
Yeah, yeah.
it's because they sat and it failed, and it failed, and they did like 80 takes, but on that 80th take, it all worked, and it's incredible. But they spent months on the wrong side of that line, and it just kept tweaking
Yeah,
it
yeah,
little bit, little bit, little bit, and then they got it
yeah,
just over that line, and they caught it on video, and it's incredible. And
yeah,
that's how those guys work, and they're a big like creative inspiration to me. So
yeah. Well, I've got two quick one just for Chris and then one for both of you,
okay.
if I might. For Chris, what's the origin of Route 9? How do you did you used to
Well,
live on Route 9 somewhere?
no. My when I first made my Instagram account, that was going to be my account, I started it
Uh-huh.
out as, it was called Small You Later. Instead of like Smell You Later, it was
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Small You Later, because I was going to make small things. But I thought, you know what, that's not professional enough. And so I just started, I started I started thinking, well, it's like, well, there's Route 6. I want to make signs, and there's Route 66, but okay, I love Route 66 and the idea of Route 66 and the road itself and everything, but all the shit you find in the stores with Route 66 logos on it, everywhere you go, I don't like any of that. That's,
Yeah,
but so I didn't want to associate myself with anything with like the Route 66. 9 is my lucky number. I won't go into it, but there's a lot of nines in my
mhm,
past, and 9 is just my lucky number. And so I thought, well, I want to put a 9 in there. And I thought, well, what about like Route 9? Oh, and that rhymes with signs, Route 9 signs. Boom, boom, boom. That's something.
yeah,
The word root
yeah.
has 5 letters, signs has 5 letters. It can be symmetrical. I can make it square, I can make it round. I can put it on a shield like a road sign.
Mhm.
I live right next to Highway 99 that runs up the center of California. I can see it from my window. It's about a quarter mile away. I thought about
Mm-hmm.
Route 99 signs, but it was more of that's a little too specific, and it doesn't flow as well. Um,
Right.
Route 9 signs is just kind of Route 9 is an actual in New Jersey. They call it Highway 9 or Route 9. It is an actual. There's Route 9s everywhere,
Yeah.
but it's just
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just a good name, you know. It's just it's
Yep. It
something
is a good name.
it's thanks it's one of those things where like when you first try it out, it's like when you first name a pet and like, oh, are we really going to call this dog Sterling, you know, because I have a corgi
Yeah.
named Sterling, and the first few weeks it kind of it doesn't roll off the tongue, but now I can scream it at the top of my voice, you know, across the backyard with no
Yep.
problem because
Yep.
that's just what it is. So it took a little while for me to get comfortable with it, but yeah, that's just where it came from. Just kind of made
Okay.
it up.
I live on County Route 10 right here. It's a rural route, but I
Uh-huh.
am surrounded by Route 9G, Route 9H, Route
Right.
9J.
Well, okay, so you know, funny story. My favorite, the sign that really made me want to make signs was is called Moon Motel. Oh, nice. Who's that?
That is Charlie, our corgi mix.
Oh, nice. Yeah, my Sterling. He's I got him from a breeder. His siblings are all show dogs in Canada, and meanwhile he's here at my house, just rolling in the dirt. And he looks like he's half
Have you,
corgi, half cow. Um,
yeah, yeah. Have you seen that meme? I am domesticus, whatever. I am Jeff. That's my
yes.
dog. I am Jeff.
um, what was
I,
I gonna say?
I see
Oh,
that one a lot.
um, oh, but the sign that made me want to make signs was Moon Hotel, and it was in New Jersey. It's this incredible space age '60s motel sign, just incredible sign. And years like 2 years down the road after I'd already named my shop Route 9 Signs, and I was making that sign again, and I was on Street View and I was tootling around, and I realized that this sign that made me want to make signs is actually on Route 9 in New Jersey. So I was like, oh,
Nice.
well, there you go. If I ever had any
There you go.
questions at all, whether or not this was the right name, it was, because my favorite sign, or at least my favorite non-Las Vegas sign, is on Route 9 in New Jersey. So,
Awesome. And then the question for both of you, and it's an opinion, and then I'm literally asking because I'm struggling with it. Um, freedom units versus millimeters. As all this technology starts to roll, like I'm dealing with sadly, I lost a laser source in my brand new fiber laser. They're in the press. But they're like, all the techs are talking in millimeters. And I'm like, I don't do millimeters, bro. He's like, you do. The software just does it in the background. And I'm like, it's such a struggle for me. Is this something that I need to just embrace and start using millimeters?
Jeff, do you want to go
It,
first, or do we want to go at the same time?
Yeah,
One, two,
yeah.
three.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Um,
I
I'm
don't even
working on
know,
it.
but I'm making an assumption that Jeff has evolved to the millimeters, to the metric
Um,
system.
yeah, I mentioned it I was talking about this on the on our last episode, but that's only been out for a few hours right now, so we probably haven't
yeah,
heard
yeah.
that yet. But I don't think in millimeters yet. That's a problem, but I have printed a 3D ruler that does like 120 or something.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, it's maybe 200 something. It's I don't know, 6 or 7 inch ruler, but it's all in millimeters and centimeters, and I keep that sitting right here next to my computer because when it's like I'll download something and I'll want to scale it to be the size I want before I print it. But when I download it and it says it's 73 centimeters, I can't just visualize 73 centimeters. I don't know. I mean,
Hmm.
if you told me it was going to be about 2 inches, I can picture that. I know how big
Right,
2 inches
right.
is. But the 73 centimeters doesn't work for me in my head. So I've got a ruler. I pick up the ruler. I keep it right here on my desk. I pick it up, and then if I want to know what 73 centimeters is, I put my fingernail right in the 73 and I look at it and I say, I want it a little bigger than that. Let's make it 100.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that in front of me and then I can put that into the computer. But I think if I keep doing this printing stuff for another year or so, I might actually get to the point where I can actually think where I can actually visualize millimeters and
Mhm.
centimeters a little better.
Okay.
I mean, I can visualize an inch. I know how big an inch is when I can think about an
Me
inch.
too.
I know how big it is. It's in my head. But the millimeters, not so much. It's just, but it's just repetition and use. The more you use them, the
Yeah,
more
yeah,
they
yeah. That's fair.
become reasonable, and you keep an analog source handy, like a physical ruler that you can just pick up and you can hold it and you can say, okay, well, this right here is 30 centimeters. I can see it. Okay,
Mhm.
now I can just decide whether that's enough or whether it's too much, and I can scale
Mhm.
from there. I
Mm-hmm.
don't
Yeah.
mind working with it. I just I'm not capable of thinking in it yet, but
Right.
I
Well,
think there's no getting around it. The future is really in there. If you're going to be doing stuff with lasers and 3D printers, it's almost inevitable. You can run a
Yeah.
CNC on fractions, thousandths. You can run
Decimals.
thousandths
Yeah.
of an inch on a CNC, and I still run my Shapeoko on inches, although
mm-hmm.
it's
Hmm.
capable of doing metric as well. But so I mean,
What about you?
it's worth it. I think you should just start with the analog. You pick up the ruler and
Yeah.
you look at it until you know
Yeah.
what 30 centimeters is. You can just pick something up and look at it and go, well,
Yeah.
that's 30 centimeters.
Right now, I use my caliper. I upgraded my calipers. They're still not like Starrett's or anything, but it's a decent set of calipers, and I can yeah, it's .01, and then I just hit go, and it tells me that that's oh no, it's .01 millimeters, 0.005 inches. So I
But if
can
you, but
convert
if,
it with
but if,
my caliber.
right, but if you're working in millimeters to begin with, you don't have to do that conversion. It's just, I mean, it's just, it's a step. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? Um,
yeah, it is a
for
step.
for me, I have fully embraced the metric system. I everything that I do is in the context of millimeters. Um,
Hmm.
I don't even really necessarily work in centimeters. I work in millimeters and fractions, like tenths of a millimeter. But what I have a good understanding now. I've been doing it that way long enough that I know that
Hmm.
okay, when I talk to my clients, I talk in terms of inches and feet. But my workflow, it's all about it's all metric. I'll tell somebody, oh, it's gonna be about 6 inches wide. But in my head, I'm like, well, that's
Hmm.
150 millimeters. It's gonna be about, I hedge it. I say it's gonna be about six. So if there's someone who throws a ruler on it when they get it and like, well, it's a 16th of an inch bigger than he said it was going to be. Well, I said it was going to be about that. But I
Hmm.
have these machines that I work with are so precise that I can make changes that like a tenth of a millimeter to something, and that changes the
Hmm.
tolerance, the fit. And it's just, I mean, I could do the same thing with inches and quarter, like in fractions
Hmm.
and all of that. But I just the software, every time I
Hmm.
turn on my Glowforge, I have to click it over to millimeters. um
Yeah,
my design
yeah.
software that I use, it has both. But I um I use millimeters. I can tell you, 300 is a foot. 600 is roughly 2 feet. And again, when I'm estimating a size for somebody, it doesn't matter if it's a little bit off. But when I'm
Right.
actually, and one of the things that I have learned is a little cheat that I have started to do, because I don't write anything down. I don't do it. But if I draw out a piece, if I'm making a sign, and I I'm looking at a photo on my computer and I'm kind of drawing the shapes on top of the photo. Say it's a really good photo and the perspective and everything is right. And if I draw out a square to match a square that's on a sign, and it's 148 millimeters wide, 148.2 millimeters wide, I'll cheat it and just round it up to the nearest five. I'll make it 150 millimeters. Or if it's 146 and a half when I draw it, I'll cheat it down to make it 145. And then that way, if later on I'm like, oh, what was this? Was like if I lose the file or whatever, I can take the piece that I made and I can throw it on my calipers and be like, oh, well, the caliper says it's 145 millimeters. It's 100 and it helps me kind of keep track. I can I will kind of fudge things to make it a nice increment of 5 or whatever. Which when you're talking about fudging it a couple of millimeters in either way, 3 millimeters is like an eighth of an inch, for example. And on a sign that's
Mm-hmm.
18 inches tall, an eighth of an inch isn't much.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's going to notice that. Well, that box on that sign is an eighth of an inch too short. Nobody's going to notice that. But I do
Right,
that to
right.
try and give myself. It's easier when I'm dealing with, like, if I
Yeah,
offset a piece or
yeah.
I inset a piece by 2 millimeters. Well, it's either going to be a 5, it's going to end in a 5 or a 0 plus 2 in this direction. So I tend to kind of standardize my stuff a little bit. I do work in millimeters, but I try and be real kind of consistent with it. I try and work in like fives, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Just because
Absolutely.
I will forget, be like, oh, I can't remember 147.83, but I can remember 150.
Right,
That
right.
sort
Yeah.
of thing.
I've got a really good friend in Australia, and that's why I own this inches
Hmm.
metric tape measure, so we can
Yeah.
talk. And he apparently that's very. I don't want to say Americans only, but we are so concerned with a 32nd and a 64th and all that kind of stuff. And when he builds furniture in Australia, it's 140. He'll go measure for a desk, and if it's I would say a desk is 147, but if he measures 147, he'll call it 150.
Yeah.
Like they just simplify everything. They just
Yeah.
round everything, and he's like, "What are you going to stress out? Why are you stressing out over an eighth of an inch?
Right.
Who cares if it's an eighth of an inch bigger or smaller?
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless it's a precision fit. But if you're, I guess what I'm trying to convince myself to do this. I tried to switch to metric years ago, and I just started tripping over my own face. But
Yeah.
now I find myself overcomplicating the math because I have to go into millimeters
Hmm.
in the machine,
Yeah.
but I'm designing in inches, and it's just so I need to just
Yeah.
become bilingual.
I can think in both. I can do rough translation. I can do a rough I can be like, oh well, if this is 16 inches, that's roughly 400 millimeters. I
Right.
don't go the next step and say, well, that's 40 centimeters or whatever. I don't even. It's like I
Okay,
work
you just stay in
strictly
millimeters. Yeah.
millimeters
Yeah.
and tenths of millimeters. I don't
Okay,
be
I
like,
could
well,
probably
this
do
is
that.
six
Yeah.
six centimeters and 6 centimeters and 5 millimeters. No, I just say it's 65 millimeters.
Right.
Um,
See, that's where
it's
that's where I get. I was going to ask, where do you start doing the break, the 10 or the drop the zero, go from 400 to 40,
No, I don't.
and if
Yeah,
you
I
don't,
don't. I don't
perfect, perfect,
because
perfect.
I
Yeah,
just I
yeah.
millimeter is my standard
Think of them
unit,
like
and I will.
thou. Think
What's
of them
that?
Say
like
again.
thou. If you work in thousandths, if you
Yeah.
work in a
Mhm.
thousandth of an inch, do you ever go 10 thou equals a hundredth of an inch? No, it's 10
No.
thou.
Yeah.
Right, right,
That's
right.
that. See, that's where you're out. Is what you're trying to push a different thinking onto a
Mm-hmm.
different.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different scale, but it's the same thinking.
Right.
You're overcomplicating things.
I was an
I
aircraft
am
mechanic. I
definitely.
was an aircraft mechanic, and I used to work in thousandths. Tolerances for certain parts and things like that. In what I'm working with the 3D printing and the laser cutting, I do get down into the tenths of a millimeter, but I don't need to get any finer than that. Like my I don't need to break it down into like thousandths of an inch. I'm good with,
Right. Right.
you know,
Right.
I guess if you're getting into a tenth of a millimeter, you're getting close to that. But
Mm-hmm.
it's just something it's easier for me to
Yeah.
understand. And
And
a lot of the math that I do is just I don't it's I don't even know how I do it. Like when I solve angles, or I fix perspective, or I figure out how, yeah, I can't explain it. I just figure
yeah,
it out.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Same,
There's
same.
there's
I'm
I
glad
I'm
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 glad I'm not the
horrible.
only one.
I'm horrible at math. I can do, long division is my kryptonite, and it always has been, but math has never been my strong point. But I'm more of a visual learner, so
Hmm.
I translate a lot of I do a lot of there's a lot of math in my builds, but I try and simplify it as much as I can, and just kind
Yeah,
of just yeah, just draw it out and kind of imagine it. And there's formulas for everything. I don't know what they are. I'm
yeah,
just kind of
yeah.
figuring it out on my
I've
own.
I've employed two. They're not cheap. Siri and Alexa.
Yeah. Yeah.
And most of the time they'll answer anything I ask them.
Usually.
Yeah, I
So, are you running out of
okay.
time, Chris? We should
Yeah,
probably.
yeah. How we doing?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to wrap it up here in a little bit. Like I said, we have a lot going on, and my wife is probably ready for a break because my son can.
Yeah, we should.
He's
We
been
should probably.
been out of school for a couple weeks. He gets to where he's a handful. So yes,
We should probably jump
we're
into some things of the week so we can get you out of
yeah.
here before things get out of
Okay.
control. Did you have something you could throw in for a thing of the week?
It's kind of it's a thing, um, and I apologize for not having it in advance. But when we were talking before we started recording, you said, just like something I'm really really into. And when first off, when is this going to air? Do you think this is
Uh,
going to release?
2 weeks from today.
Okay, all right. Well, that's good because I will already be back. But
Oh,
I have
16.
really, I have really gotten into train travel. And I know that's probably the last thing you thought I was going to say, but I started just kind of as I'm getting older, as I get to where I don't want to drive as much, as my vision has started to, my depth perception is not great. I have discovered the joys of just hopping on a train and going somewhere. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're on the East Coast, it might not seem like a big deal, but out here on the West Coast, it's pretty rare. There's people, who ride trains. It's just not something most people do. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I've been really getting into like the Amtrak routes and figuring out where I can go um, on a day trip, or where I can go for 2 days and come back and just kind of relax and rewind, or not rewind, but just relax and reset. And
Mm-hmm.
it's been something that's really been I've really gotten into. It's something I really enjoy. I plan that, it's something that I can sit and plan ahead of time. I can plan my route. I can look at timetables. There's a lot of math in that, but I can print out timetables and think, okay, well, if I leave here at this time, I can get to this town, and then I can catch this train. And it's a lot of it's just a lot of kind of like daydreaming, kind of like virtual road trip, which is I do that a
Mm-hmm.
lot. But yeah, my thing that I'm really obsessed with lately is just finding out where I can go on a train and just get away and just relax and not have to do anything. And I asked when this is airing because I don't like advertising when I'm not home. But next week I'm taking a bus to L.A., and then from LA, I'm hopping on the Coast Starlight, and I'm going to ride it all the way up to Eugene, Oregon. And I'm going to spend the night
Oh
on the
wow.
train. I have a sleeper cabin. I have a little roomette, and I'm gonna sleep on the train because here at home I get very little sleep. I got 3.5 hours last
Yeah.
night because of my son. So
Uh-huh.
it's part, a little vacation, a little getaway, but it's also just like necessity. It's like I need a couple of good nights of sleep, and I have to leave the house to get it sometimes. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's something that it's opened up a whole new world to me of places that I can go and things that I can do, and you see things that you wouldn't see otherwise. Um, from the train. It goes places that cars don't. So again, East Coast, it's probably more prevalent than it is out here on the West Coast. But I say, go on Amtrak and look and see where your nearest train station is and where it's heading, and just hop on a train. Like, it's a new experience. It's something that I had never done up until a couple of years ago. Now it's like my favorite thing to do is to just hop on.
It is
So
a whole different world.
yeah,
Really is.
it is a bit of a skill, just learning how to read the timetables and figure out where you're going, and there's a little bit of risk. It's like, ooh, well, maybe the train will be running late and I won't make my connection. Well, what am I going to do when I get there if I have to kill a few hours? It's it's kind of like a choose your own adventure type of thing. But yeah, that is like my now, when I'm not working on my signs, if I have time where I'm sitting around and I'm kind of just trying to get my son to go to sleep and we're kind of hanging out in his room, I will hop on and look at train routes and figure out where I want to go next. So that is my kind of like my new thing that keeps me going.
I have taken an Amtrak trip before. I mean, it was a long time ago. Actually, I can tell you I can't tell you when it was, but you can figure out when it was. We went to Seattle to visit some family when I was a teenager. And we drove up to Chicago, hopped an Amtrak, and took the Amtrak all the way across from Chicago, up through Oregon and up to Seattle. And
You took the Empire Builder. That's what that one was called.
You can tell exactly when that was, because when we were in Oregon, it was snowing ash.
Oh yeah,
Mount St. Helens.
Mount St. Helens, what, 81,
so
something
that
like
was
that.
somewhere early to mid 80s.
It was early 80s. It was like 81.
So yeah,
it was a big story here on the West Coast.
Yeah, it was a big story everywhere, but I guess bigger there. But it made an impression on me. It was a fun trip. It was something new and different to sit there and watch the world go by out the window of the train. You get it's totally different from sitting on a freeway.
Oh yeah,
I won't argue with you. It's a good time.
There are so many things. There are so many things that stress us out and worry us. And I heard someone on a podcast say, let the train take the strain. There are some places where I will drive. I will drive to Las Vegas. I will drive to LA to take Matthew to Disneyland or to the Bay Area to his doctor. But other than that, man, if I can get there on the train, I will do it. Plus, you can get high on the train, and you don't have to worry about it.
That's fair.
I'm rarely sober when I'm on the train.
Nice.
Fair enough. It's vacation time.
That's right.
How about you, Al? We got to get this moving here, don't we?
Yeah. I'm glad. I'm sorry. I'm glad you brought that up. My wife and I have talked about. We're like not even a mile from the Amtrak.
Yeah.
From the train, the line.
Yeah.
The Metro North is just south of us here, 40 minutes. But what's in the Empire Trail?
The Empire
Well,
Builder
there's an Empire. This one goes up towards Canada. It's got the glass top.
Okay.
Anyway, we want to do that someday. Along with the reasoning for you doing it, my thing of the week this week, and I would encourage anybody to find some form of it in some way. You don't have to do what anybody else is doing, and it sounds silly, but therapy. I'm in therapy, and it keeps me level-headed. It keeps my mom. You're not damaged. You're not broken if you go to talk to a therapist, but it just helps you kind of align yourself and your thoughts. And I would encourage anybody, if you don't go to therapy, find a confidant that you can trust, not your friend who's going to tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
But mental health and mental acuity and dealing with processing things that we have to deal with every day and all day is a necessity. And it's been a huge thing
Self-care. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah.
taking this
So,
train trip. Taking this train trip is like therapy to me. And
100%.
I have actually,
Yeah.
yes, not that, maybe they'll sponsor you guys one of these days, but I have enlisted the services of betterhelp.com. A couple of years ago,
Yeah.
I was dealing with always dealing with a lot of stuff, but I was dealing with some
Hmm.
issues I won't get into here. But I signed up for it, and Ralph was my therapist, and once a week for several months we sat face to face,
Good for
and
you. Yeah.
and it was very I don't know that it was necessarily eye opening, but it was really nice to release some of that pressure.
Yeah.
So yes, so
Yeah.
and taking, like I tied together this train trip, there's no
Yep.
stress involved. I'm letting someone else handle that. So yeah, that
Yep.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that is very important. And
Yeah.
it's something that back in the day, you're ex-military, I'm ex-military, where bringing something like that up back in those days, people look at you kind of side eye.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna pay you a compliment, is being able to admit that, one, that you're not perfect, and two, that you need help. That's one of the manliest fucking things you can possibly do. So I'm dead serious. I'm dead serious. There's none of this
I appreciate that. Yeah.
no
Yeah.
fake
Yeah.
performative bullshit. One of the
Yep.
manliest things you
Yep.
can fucking do is say, you know what, I need some help.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
not
Thank you.
and not worry about what people think. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yep.
So good for you. Good for you.
Yeah. Thank you. And real quick, and I'm so upset that I can't remember this young man's name. I have a nephew who's on the spectrum,
Hmm.
and he's obsessed with trains. He's
Uh-huh.
obsessed with trains. But anyway, there's a young man on Instagram. I think his name is Alex, but he does miniature photography,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
he's very much on the spectrum. You know the guy I'm talking about?
He does it like
This
with
kid's a
cars and
Yeah, he does
yeah, yeah,
cars, and then he'll
yeah.
go. He'll do like old cars, and then he'll put them in front of an old abandoned gas station and
Yep.
make it look like a
I've seen that. I've seen his work.
incredible shots.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
wish I'll try to find his name, Jeff, for the show notes. But
yeah,
yeah, amazing guy, amazing
yeah,
guy.
yeah.
But thank you, Jeff. What do you
Yes.
got?
Okay. Well, what I am super excited about this week is something that you can do with your 3D printer. It's a lot of times you hear them talked about as suspended 3D prints, and the other term you hear thrown around is filament string art. Is where you've got an outer frame and then some little thin strings of filament that run back and forth, and they hold up an object that's suspended out in space in the middle of the frame. And I think they're just really cool. And I got obsessed with this stuff. I don't know, a couple of nights ago, I was thinking about it. So, I mean, I got up yesterday, I started doing some YouTube research and reading how you're supposed to do these things. And then last night, I went through about 4 prototypes in how to make strings and make them work and hold us on strong. And then I went ahead and did my logo, where the outer edge of the logo was the frame, and then all the name and my letter A were sort of suspended up in the middle. And it's a really cool way to use a 3D printer. It's sort of a fancy technique where you're you're bridging across air, which is, I mean, 3D printing, you're supposed to build on top of things. You start by building it on the plate, and then you build on top of that, and then you build on top of that. And
Right.
or if you've got nowhere to build on top of, you're supposed to have supports. But suddenly this thing has got it bridging strings across thin air somehow, and it's
How
magic.
do they not sag?
Well, there's a lot of stuff to help it not sag, including slowing the speed down and turning the temperature lower are both things that are helping the process, because you think about the filament coming out is a liquid, and then as it cools it hardens into the shape. So if you start with a lower nozzle temperature, it only has to cool an extra 10 degrees to go back to solid because it's barely liquid at that point. You use it the lower temperature that you're allowed to run at, and I think you're supposed to PLA between 190 and 220, and I turned it down to 200. And then there's also in your speed settings, there's a bunch of different speed settings. There's a speed setting specific to bridges, and that was I mean, it was doing normal printing between 200 and 300 millimeters was normal printing speeds, and it had a bridge speed of 50, and I turned that down to 25 or 30 because that way.
Isn't there a pen? Isn't there a pen that does this kind of a little more archaically?
Yes,
But
actually, I bought one of those for myself for Christmas. I haven't really spent much time playing with it, but having the lower
I can't wait to see what you do with that.
Oh God, yeah. I hope I can find something useful to do with it. It's not as
If anybody will, you are the man for that.
yeah. I hope I can find something interesting to do with it. But the lower temperature makes it harden faster, and a slower feed rate means that it only has to hang in the midair for. It doesn't get too
seconds.
far away from the nozzle before it hardens up in space.
Right.
Yeah.
So somehow, and there's also this other. There's another setting. There's a something in the slicing settings. There's a conventional or arachne. There's arachne is a slicer type, and I don't necessarily understand all of it, but apparently it slices with the ability to do a variable width.
Wow.
And I don't have any idea how that works.
In the
But
air?
I guess I don't know. I mean, the arachne is to do it was designed to do a variable width line, so it can actually squish it out more, so it makes a fatter line or a thinner line. So you can get like if you've got a space where you've got 1.5 lines worth of material you want to put in there,
right?
And it can make thinner lines so that that actually fits instead of having to go one and then just skipping out on the second one that didn't have room for it. I'm not sure I understand it at all. I don't know what arachne is other than a variable line slicer, but I do know that it is important to turn that on to get the threads to work properly.
This is like the 3D printer equivalent of like what is it, feeds and speeds for CNC, kind of.
Absolutely. I've finally dug deep enough. I've finally dug deep enough into 3D printing to actually run into feeds and speeds and hit the point of complication that I actually need to change from default.
Yeah, you're actually 3D printing. The rest of us are 2.5D printing.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, Jeff, everything that you described just now, to tie it all together and put it in a bow, if I can be the person who does that, is what you're talking about with all the numbers and the things that you're tweaking. You are looking at your spectrum and you are taking things that were on the impossible side of that line and just nudging it over into possible, and then you've got your piece. So that is the theory that I put out there. That is you putting that into practice. Exactly. The okay go theory.
This fast it sags, this fast it stays straight.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Slowly back it off until it stops fucking up, and then you've hit the line of what you can actually get done with this piece of hardware.
You change this one number by a 1/10%, and suddenly you're having success. That is the
Chris, please make please start making shirts that say "Okay, go" on them. And not the band shirt, your own shirt.
Oh, my own shirt. Oh, okay. Because I'm right here in my closet. I can pull one out here for you pretty quick. They might be giants. I've got the Aquabats. I've got Makers on Zoom having coffee. There's a throwback for you, Jeff. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to reach out to the guys from OK Go and get them in on this discussion.
Sounds like
Yeah,
a good idea.
that's an amazing process.
Uh,
I love this theory. Yeah.
Before we wrap things up here, Chris, do you have a dream tool that you could get that you would want to pick? Is there anything you'd love to have for free if you could just imagine having something cool?
Yeah, another Bambu X1 carbon with 4 AMS units.
There you go.
I have 2
Well,
AMS units right now. I mean, I'm dead serious. That is like that is. I wish I had bought 2 of those instead of the X1 and one of the smaller ones. I wish I had 2 carbon units. And
yeah.
that's like no joke. As far as for tools for making stuff, because I have all the woodworking tools. I have bandsaw. I have a table saw. Believe it or not, um, used to have a CNC. It was terrible with it. But no, I would just have a backup 3D printer.
And the AMS thing is, I feel like I'm slightly limited by only having 4 colors to play with.
Yes, you are. If you look at that Stardust sign that I made that I took to Las Vegas, um, there are some 8 color prints
Yep.
on that. Yes, well, because I can do 8. If you look on that, there's a part that says Lido and it has like sun rays going out. That's an 8 color print. And if you look at the marquee panels on that Stardust sign,
Yeah.
those and it's I print it with ABS because the temperature doesn't affect it. But yeah, get yourself at least another 4 color AMS unit.
Okay, so not having a 3D printer at all, that
Uh
would be my dream tool. Is I've got to get a 3D printer because
right,
Jeff's never going to let me not
right.
live this down. These AMS units, are they something you add on to a, like I
Yes.
buy a 3D printer and then I add these on?
Bamboo
So you could do
offers
16?
You can do up to 16 colors with the Bamboo X1. Yes, you can. It
Wow.
it really adds a lot of time to your prints, but
Right. I
these
understood that
machines
part.
are
Yeah.
so, at least my experience, they're so reliable. If like some of the color prints I made for that Stardust sign were like 22, 24 hour print jobs for a piece that's
You just
only
walk away.
3 millimeters thick, but it's
Yeah.
it's got 8 different colors, and almost every layer has every color. So every layer, every point 0.06 millimeter thick layer has 8 color changes. Oh, and Jeff, do you
Wow.
are you using the .4 nozzle or a
Yeah,
.2?
yeah, I'm still on the .4. I'm thinking I might want to try a .2, but I don't have a whole lot of need for it yet.
That's all I use is a .2. And
Now,
unless it's something that's not gonna be visible, I use a .2 nozzle and I use the .06 layer height. I use the absolute finest settings you can do. And if it takes 24 hours to print it, so be it. That machine can handle it. I can go to bed and get up in the morning and it's still plugging away and it's perfect.
yeah, as long as you make sure there's plenty of room for the poop to fall and not get piled up.
It falls on the floor and I sweep it
Jeff,
up every few weeks.
There you go.
Jeff, that F bomb you sent me, how long does that take to print? 3
Uh,
color.
well, depends on how I print it. The first ones I printed were all pre-colored and one piece, and it had to switch back and forth between colors for every layer that had the F on the front,
Yeah.
because it had
Right.
the red F on the front. So there was 60 layers that had F on the front, so it had to switch back and forth all those times. But then I improved the design by cutting the F out, and now I print the bomb where there's a hole where the F goes,
Yep.
and then it has to switch colors once to go to the fuse, and then once to go to the red at the top of the fuse.
Yep.
So it only has to
Yeah.
switch colors twice, and then I print the F separately and pop it into the hole, and it prints in like half the time. So
Yep.
I think I'm down to maybe an hour or an hour and a half per F bomb, where I was
Yeah.
up at like 4 hours per F bomb when I first started making them.
Yeah. It
Okay.
has really
Cool.
taken away my need to paint a lot of things. There's a lot of stuff
Yeah.
that I don't even paint anymore because I can color 3D print it. If I can find the right color filament in the right type of filament, a lot of times I don't even need to paint anything. It's fantastic.
It is. I hate painting.
Me
But
too.
it's funny. I really like painting in software versus I dislike painting with actual paint. And it's the
Yes.
paint that gets me. It's not the process. I mean, I can use a triple aught brush just fine doing detail work, but I don't like to actually work with the paint and the layers and the wet and the
Right.
mess. But I love downloading. That's one of the things I've done with the Bambu that has been a lot of fun is downloading a model that is one single. It's just a model. There's no
Right.
color. It is just
Right.
but then I'll just go ahead and paint it in software. So all the different areas are the different colors. And
Yep.
when you hit print, you have to wait an extra 6 hours for the color changes to happen, but it comes out all painted and pretty, and it's just ready to go right out the gate.
It's worth it. It's worth it. Look at that. And this is the last thing is look at that coral court sign that I made. The marquee where it says the letter where it has like the grid with the letters on it. That's all just one print, and I just printed the face. It is sitting on the face of a much lower resolution box, but then I skinned that box with styrene. So yeah, go and look at that. And that I couldn't do that by hand, but it's so good on those printers that it's just a raw print. I didn't sand it. I didn't touch it. I just stuck it on, and it's perfect.
It's yeah. The
Because I'm
printers
a
these
because,
days are
because I'm
amazing.
a cheating sack of shit is what is why.
There you go.
Well, you just keep going, brother.
Okay, yes, I will, and I will continue to be a cheating sack of shit. That's fine. I'm
We're,
cool with
we're
it.
gonna we're gonna convince Al to become a cheating piece of shit too. He's
There we
already
go.
I
cheating with
am. I am.
laser and
Yeah.
CNC. He might as well start cheating with plastic
Yeah.
too.
I'm sitting between two of them. There's one there, and there's one there.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've really pushed our schedule past the
Yeah.
limit here. There's going to be somebody's wife, whether it's yours or mine, is going to have a problem here soon. So I think we better wrap things up.
Yeah. Well,
But
gentlemen, thank you for having me.
definitely,
Where do we find you?
Route
Where,
Route 9 Signs on Instagram is where I share most of my stuff. I've recently deleted Twitter. I'm also on Blue Sky, but I don't even know what the name is there. It's mostly just stupid shit that I post there. But yeah, Route 9 Signs on Instagram is my primary outlet. Chris at route9signs.com is my email address if you can't get a hold of me on Instagram. But yeah, if you have any questions about anything we've talked about, anything if you want to see any progress shots or you have questions or anything, I'm the opposite of a gatekeeper. I want to kick it wide open, and I want more people doing what I do. And here's my little pitch. Here's my little sign off is I want people to come to me and learn to do what I do because I've turned people into sign fans. There are people who weren't paying attention to signs, but now they do because of my work. And that will lead to future like preservation. You know, the more sign fans there are, a certain percentage of those people are gonna take it a step further and become, maybe an advocate for a sign in their city or preserve what's there. So if somebody wants to start making signs like I do, reach out because I think the more of us there are, just gonna be it's gonna be a healthier community for signs and for the future of the signs that are still out there. So reach out.
Awesome.
awesome.
I had a boss. Instilled in me to do my job better as
Yeah.
I improve.
Well, and
we
I
all move up.
yeah, my theory is I want to inspire someone to get started doing something, and then I want them to get so good at it that I learn something from them. I want it to come back to me, and it has already numerous occasions. I want someone to teach me how to do that. And I think all of us are inspired by it's not a maker podcast if you don't mention Jimmy DiResta, but I think Jimmy inspired me because Jimmy shows everything that he does, and he was real kind. The time that I met him at Maker Faire in 2019, sharing with me what he knows and like diving into what I do, like trying to help me get better at what I do. So I was inspired by him to share what I know with everybody. And the more of us that are doing this type of stuff, I think the better.
Well, we got a
Good.
Jimmy reference in. I think we've got
Yep.
the
There we go.
full rounded show now.
That might
There's
be the latest it has ever happened in any of the times I've dropped his name. It's usually in the first like 10 minutes. So
yeah.
I
Well,
made you wait for that one.
I'm pretty sure we haven't got an episode without him mentioned in it yet. So
Well,
Yeah.
and really so. I really do admire the guy. I respect the guy. I think he's like the connective tissue for a lot of us. So
Mhm.
I think so
Mhm.
too.
right on.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on, Chris. I
Yes, thank you
super
for accommodating
had a
me.
great it's great
Yeah.
having you on. Also, I'd like to
Absolutely.
thank Al for taking the time to hang out and ask good questions. I'd like to thank all the listeners for tuning in. And I also need to have a huge thank you to our current patrons for their support. So many thanks to Adam from BKR Customs and Ed Swanson of Ed's Clocks and More. Much thanks for that support. And if you enjoyed listening, would like to help support the show, you can share it with your friends, you can leave a review, or you can join our Patreon. You can find Patreon at patreon.com/digifabricators. You can leave podcast reviews in about a dozen places, including Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Podchaser, Spotify, Podcast Addict, Audible, and Good Pods. And we have a Discord server open to all listeners. Patrons get access to an exclusive patron channel. And links to our Discord server and Patreon page are in the Digifabricators Instagram bio, which you should be following, which is at digi-fabricators. So if you or someone you know does cool things with your digital tools, please give us. What are you waving at, Chris?
Al was taking a picture. Sorry.
Oh, that's fine.
I can't keep a serious. I can't. I'm sorry. I'm the worst at disrupting stuff. I'm sorry.
No, that's
Keep going.
fine. I was just reading and I see some shit going on in the background. I thought I was.
Just ignore us.
So if anybody does
We're
anything
bonding.
cool with the digital tools, please give us some suggestions because we're gonna run out of friends eventually. So I can be found most places as a weird guy, and Al can be found under New York Woodworks, which is NY Woodworks with an X. And thanks again to everybody, and we will have to catch you on the next. Sweet. Nailed it.